Are we staying off video?
I would hope you'd be on video, but I mean, it's kind of up to each of you, I guess.
Well, it won't allow it.
It didn't for me until just a moment ago.
Let me make you guys co-host. Maybe that is why.
Yeah, because it didn't allow me to turn video on until I clicked on the broadcast.
There we go. Now that we're co-hosts, we can.
Yay! There we go, guys.
All right. Well, hey, good afternoon, everybody. My name is David Jones. I am an attorney. I'm in my office here at Geekdom downtown, which is a very quiet place to work these days. But it feels like a safe place because of the testing program that they're running. I'd first like to thank Tu and Alex for organizing Startup Week this month. It's, as with many things this year, it's an extra big challenge to organize these kinds of events when we're all in the situations that we're all in. And part of the reason I think we wanted to do this discussion was that in Startup Week last year, we had most of these same panelists addressing the topic of how you build and maintain a workplace culture that attracts really strong talent, allows that talent to be nurtured and grow, and makes your company into one that your potential customers look at and say, hey, I want to be part of that. That's a cool deal. I want to be in there. And because so much has happened in 2020, I thought, and I know the experiences of all of the panelists who I'll have them introduce themselves in a moment, have all had very different, very interesting, and very challenging experiences through the course of 2020. Both with lockdowns, with the impact of social upheaval, and so maybe I'll start turning it over to them. And maybe what I'll do is go left to right, at least as I see the boxes. And so that's the first person I'll introduce is Sarah Woolsey. Sarah is the founder of the Impact Guild, another co-working space here in town that I love and maintain a membership. And so Sarah, maybe you can talk a little bit about what the Impact Guild is, how 2020 has affected you, and what your thoughts are about how you've maintained, your team and your community, or tried to nurture them in this challenging time.
Yes, thank you for the introduction and for inviting me to be a part of the conversation today. I'm happy to be here. And this, I don't know, I feel like the moments for connection and community feel that much more profound in this season. And so it just feels very life-giving way to start the week. So yes, as David said, I'm Sarah Woolsey. So I'm the founder of the Impact Guild, which sits under a larger umbrella organization called Mission City Renewal, of which I am also the executive director. And I just say that because I'm kind of going to reference probably over the course of our time what those different hats look like and how those different programs work together. But on the Impact Guild side, we're a social and innovation, social entrepreneurship co-working space, community gathering space, which is definitely interesting in this time. And so we've certainly been exploring what it means to consider community outside of physically being able to be in proximity together. And so I'm excited to kind of get into that today. We do that both through building the connections between social entrepreneurs, and then also really even love that we're an embedded kind of space in our neighborhood of Beacon Hill, about a mile north of downtown. And so we really kind of almost function like a community center secondarily. And so there are pieces I feel like we can get into today of what it looks like just as a neighborhood organization to do that in a way that our default used to always be, here's the building, come host your thing here. And that cannot be our default mechanism anymore. So it's pushed us in some good ways, I feel like, to consider that. And so I'd love to talk about that. And then the other projects we have going on are all about community development in our neighborhoods. So we have one called Good Acres about helping mission-driven organizations rethink their real estate and physical properties in light of neighborhood needs and neighborhood contexts. And then a curriculum called Good Neighbor. So anyway, I'll kind of get a chance to reference how all those things work together, but really thankful to be here and be part of this discussion. It was really wonderful space last year as well.
Okay, so next, excuse me, next up is Aurora Geis. So Aurora is with the Digital Creative Institute, which is the first Department of Labor certified digital marketing apprenticeship program in the country. And I think, Aurora, from everything that you and I have talked about, both from the process of recruiting apprentices into your program and helping figure out how those apprentices are going to work in the partner companies that are part of DCI or do business with DCI, there have been some very unique challenges. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Absolutely. So just a little bit about the role that I play with Digital Creative Institute. It is absolutely advancing tech apprenticeships. And I love what Sarah mentioned, that she's creating this renewal in a totally disrupted environment that is requiring a lot of technology. And so our tech apprenticeships are leveraging the technologies. However, it is absolutely missing that face-to-face connection as we're building experiential learning, which is what apprenticeship is about. It's all hands-on. So that's the first thing. And then the second is really looking at how we work with our partners in the community to advance tech apprenticeships. So it's both the public and the private sector. And as Dave alluded to, in the private sector, we work with a lot of employers that are hiring talent. And so I will tell you that there have been significant challenges as a result of COVID, where we've seen a tremendous shutdown of hiring talent for roughly 6 months. And so there were some strategies that we did apply, and we were very successful in how we maintained our mission to really build future leaders in tech. And it's not just in digital marketing, but it's also in cybersecurity and data analytics. And I'll talk a little bit about how we had to reposition ourselves during the crises that really added additional value to not only employers, but to the marketplace. And with our public sector partners, we work with workforce boards, we work with cities and counties, economic development corporations, to really talk about how talent innovation strategies should include apprenticeship programs. And so those are two specific areas. And then the third is I act as the head coach for the apprenticeship program. And in that role, we have also seen significant challenges with our performance coaches and program managers that are there day to day with our apprentices. And I'll talk about some of those challenges as well that we have seen during the COVID-19 or pandemic, I should say. But I'm so grateful to be here to really talk about these strategies that we've employed. I had a little procedure done, so my throat's still sore. So thanks for having me here, Dave.
Absolutely. So Robert is the founder and CEO of Go Smart Solar, and normally office is 2 floors down below me here at Geekdom. In fact, in small fact, I think I forgot to mention this last year, but the office that I work in used to be a conference room. And it is named after Robert because of all of the generosity and kindness that he showed to mentors and coaching in the Geekdom community. And Robert and his team decided to apply a little humor to coming up with the name of the conference room. And Robert is, I don't know don't know Robert if you're 6'4", 6'5", but you're well over 6 feet. And so the conference room is called the Miggy Smalls room. And so my office, I'm sitting in Miggy Smalls right now. So Robert, why don't you talk a little bit about
yeah, great.
How,
I'll leave that right where it is. That's just a nod to the notorious BIG, and just to try to have some fun and keep it light at Geekdom from years ago. I'm thrilled to be here and to join Sarah and Aurora and Dave in this conversation. So my company is called Go Smart Solar. We are based at Geekdom. We're down on the 6th floor, which is kind of the quiet floor. And we have 9 people and 9 full-time, 3 or 4 people that are doing quite a bit of freelance work for us. And what we're executing right now and what we're very focused on is a partnership that we were selected by CPS Energy to build out a 5 megawatt community solar project. And the name of that program is called Big Sun. So some of you listening may have gotten a postcard or 2 from us in the mail. If so, I apologize if it was cluttering up maybe it gave you something fun to look at during COVID. But anyway, that's us. So we have a program with CPS called Big Sun, where we're building solar carports and selling the solar panels to anyone with a CPS bill who might want solar, but who doesn't have a roof for solar or doesn't want the solar panels on their roof. We can sell you solar panels. We stick them in one of our carports. We sell the energy onto the grid, and then CPS will drop a credit onto your bill. I know this is not a topic about solar. We're going to talk about company culture and stuff, but I wanted to give you all some context. Specifically, as we went into lockdown, let's say, we had kind of 2 challenges. First of all, we sent everyone home. And thankfully, everyone was able to find a place at home where they could work and stay productive. And then the other big question was, is our construction going to be ground to a halt? And we were sidelined for about 3 weeks, but then the construction part was able to pick back up. So we'll probably get into that as we dive into the topic. But I've got a little bit of a different perspective because we're not a software company that's just got, software developers that are, working in the digital space. We've actually got guys running heavy equipment and installing machinery. So I guess also pleased to be a part of it, Dave. Thank you for inviting me.
Sure. And the last person I'll introduce is Lana El Harouf. Lana is a Geekdom member, has a business here in San Antonio, and you're going to get the next 2 questions because one is going to be tell me about your business, and the other one is going to be you've had a journey the likes of which I think no others have had during coronavirus. And so maybe you can talk a little bit about that and the challenges it created and the things you learned as a company leader.
Right. Well, David, thank you for having me on this panel. I'm very honored. I look forward to imparting as much wisdom as I can in terms of my experience during COVID and also my experience as an entrepreneur. This business we've only started about a year ago, so we're relatively new. Excuse me. So this is a housekeeping company. I think we've been in operation for a little bit over a year ago. And our experience so far has been just developing our customer base. Excuse me. Our vision for the future is hopefully to become a home, less of a housekeeping and more of home services. So looking to leverage on just having our foot in the door, leveraging on our name, our reputation, our relationship with the clients, et cetera, not to be just another handy or Uber of housekeeping. And we're excited about what the potential is and what that might look like. We're very much in development phase. So yes, as David alluded to, we've been tested quite a bit since COVID started. So I had traveled March 8th. I traveled back home. One of my homes is in Europe, in Switzerland, to go see my father. He had surgery, happened to have surgery sometime in February. I managed to pull myself away early August. Not 5 days later, the president had issued a travel ban from Europe back to the US unless you are a resident or unless you are a citizen. And I'm neither of those. I'm here on a visa, an investor's visa, worker's visa. And I had been stuck in Europe waiting for this travel ban to lift. And I actually had to maneuver I had to, one of the hardest things about this period during the pandemic was lack of visibility. And the lack of visibility for me included how I'd be able to come back and when I'd be able to come back and work with my staff on the ground. So long story short, as we were getting closer to the winter period, with the idea of potential second wave hitting, I knew I had to take a little bit more of a drastic way to come back because that ban wasn't being lifted anytime soon. So come, I believe it was end of August, I decided to repatriate to my other home country, which is Jordan, which was not on the ban list towards the US, quarantined in a hotel room for 2 weeks, then had to leave the hotel and quarantine at home for another week. And by the time I managed to come back, which was a week from last Friday, I had been away for about just under 7 months. And by the way, David, I don't know if I told you, but by the time I traveled, they had actually lifted the ban from Europe, going back to the US. So, but I couldn't, I knew that the closer we were coming towards September, the more likely it was that I'd be able to bypass all of these quarantine steps for me to get here, but I couldn't take the risk. So yes, it was an odyssey of a trip. It was, I will say this. I had our business, the housekeeping business, in a sense, we were lucky in the fact that this was a business that really picked up after the lockdown in San Antonio in April. So we were in demand, and I admit we were extremely lucky, and we've not only been able to maintain the customers that we had once they felt more comfortable of us coming back in. The one thing that in a discussion I had with David was, even though there was a lot of stresses, like I've never had so much stress in terms of running a business and financial stress, where, again, lack of visibility. I have staff that were relying on me that couldn't go to work, and I needed to focus on maintaining them. A lot of challenging dynamics going there, and especially in terms of maintaining a staff that were practically living paycheck to paycheck. The value that came.
Okay, well, looks like she froze up there for a second. So maybe I'll come in with sort of another topic. Any of you can, go ahead.
Sorry, David, I don't know where it came off.
Oh, I can't recall exactly. I mean, it was about 30 seconds ago. You froze.
Okay.
Yeah, you're Lana, you were saying the value that came,
yes. ...
and I was on the edge of my seat.
Me too.
Right. Keep going, please.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you for that. Thankfully, luckily, it didn't break us. I was able to maintain the staff. Because of that, this challenge really identified the limits of what we could do as a company. Obviously, it forced us to look at things in various different ways. Contingency planning, A, B, C, but ending up choosing contingency plan Z. And also, it's one of those situations where being forced out of your comfort zone showed you how to do things in new ways, as with probably most people. And speaking personally, and for our type of business, I was forced to look at delegating where I wouldn't have. I was forced to, I learned how to access and navigate financial options where I might not have had. And also it expanded my customer base. The plan for us was to go slowly but surely and focus on one group of customer and solely on one group of customer. But this scenario pushed us to expand to something we had planned, but faster. And at the end of the day, it was to our advantage. So yes, it was painful, but there was a lot of value that came from it too. You always hear the adage that being put out of your comfort zone is good, but this definitely, this was a hands-on experience on that. And admittedly, we, as the type of company that we were lucky that we were in demand post lockdown. So we're very, very aware of that. But I would say that it makes us more nimble now.
So the next question I guess I would ask is sort of teed up by something Aurora said earlier, which is that, one of the things we've all lost since March is the little interactions we would have with people, the little collisions where we would just be chatting, you'd see somebody getting coffee, or you just see somebody down the hall, or, you talk with somebody on your team or a customer. Naturally you have reasons to connect. And those are, those I don't want to say they don't exist anymore, but they definitely don't exist in the same way. And so I'm curious for each of you, how you have tried to maintain kind of the marrow of your culture with a remotely distributed team. And really any.
I'll give a little bit of what we've done at Digital Creative Institute. I do want to mention though that all of us, I'm certain, as we went through the crises, there was so much significant stress that we were all undergoing. We were stressed, our customers were stressed, our apprentices were stressed, our employers were stressed. And, I don't know how many of you have heard of Robert's rule on, the 7 stages of crisis intervention. But the very first thing that he guides you to do is to conduct the crises, understand what is the crisis. Everybody was trying to figure out how to set some foundations in place because we needed to create a safety net, if you will. And thank God for the Small Business Administration and PPP loans, because that really did create some stability. But the next thing that he talks about is establishing the rapport or establishing this relationship. And we knew that we had to continually develop check-ins with our team and with our apprentices. And so what we ended up doing as a result of listening and receiving feedback is that they really wanted to remain connected in different ways. So here are a couple of things that we did that has worked to this day. The first thing is we started to open up Wednesdays and Fridays with lunch. You show up at noon on Wednesdays and Fridays, no agenda. And we just have that time consistently open. And some people show up and some people don't. But when they do, it's amazing. You end up having the water cooler conversations. So that ended up being very effective. The second thing that we ended up doing, we have sprints every 2 weeks, and we have Scrum stand-ups every single morning. And that has been extraordinarily effective because we're continually providing feedback to the team. But we added an additional time on Wednesdays where each and every one of our team members adds some kind of strategy or some kind of activity where we're continuing to learn about each other, where we are engaged. And it's a very creative session. We take about 20, 30 minutes on Wednesday, and we have learned so much more about our team members and our teammates than if we would have even been in the office standing at the water cooler, because it is an activity where we're all coming together to learn about each other. So some of those very simple practices that we have put in place has continued to build a rapport, has continued to build trust, and has continued to build really a culture of care for our team. And those simple strategies have really been effective.
Robert, you want to pick up there?
Yeah, I might go quickly. I would say, first of all, I'm not sure we've done a great job. I think it's been, we're very busy. And so we're grateful to be busy. We're grateful to be busy during COVID. And therefore it's really easy to not, I mean, I'm a little flattered to be on this panel, but I don't think that's because I would give myself an A or even a B+ on the culture thing over the last 7 months. It matters to us. I just don't think we've always gotten it right. But I'll try to explain that. So we sent everyone home. We use Zoom, or actually we use Google Hangouts, but it works great. We have daily huddles, and with video that is helpful. You can see people's faces. It allows us to stay connected. But I'll give you an example of what hasn't gone very well. We added a new team member in August, and I don't think we've onboarded him very well at all. I think that we've got a lot of work left to do. I don't think we've had the chance to say, hey, let's go to lunch. I want to tell you about the history of our company, how Jason and I met each other, and where, the sort of brief 4-year history. But everyone, I took for granted that everyone knows that, but the new guy doesn't know that, right? And you have to slow down and say, gosh, shame on me for not telling you. First of all, I'm using solar acronyms that we haven't even slowed down to say, hey, we should give you this glossary. You're a software developer. We've thrown you in the deep end with leg weights on, and no one's even explaining to you what all these acronyms stand for. So I think there's some areas where, I think we've got work left to do. Thankfully, we've told that young man, hey, I don't think we're doing a very good job of this. Give us time. We need to fix this. And he's like, oh, okay, great. Yeah, that'd be awesome. I'd love to hear the history of the company. How important is, sharing that the inspiration of where your company got its start with your new people. They don't just show up and understand what happened over the first 4 years of your company. You have to sort of be deliberate about that. So I think we've learned some lessons there. The one thing I think we have done that we've instituted more lately, meaning I think we did this first in July, and we did another one. No, we might have did the first one in August, and then we did another one in September. So we took several months off. But Jason Pittman, my co-founder, had this idea, and I quickly agreed with it, is we would go to San Pedro Springs Park and bring a folding chair, and we had a socially distant sort of coffee and tacos on a Friday morning in August. And we just put our chairs, in a large circle. And instead of having a Zoom call where we have our huddle, we did the huddle face to face. And we broke bread, right? And it was the first time for many of us to have seen each other really face to face in several months. So we decided, okay, this was great. Let's do this again, at least once a month. We're going to do another one this week. And then actually another quick shout out to Jason is he had an idea to say, okay, the next time we do this, let's surprise the team. And he went out and bought a bunch of those super soaker squirt guns that you can pump up and get a lot of air pressure on. And he had them stashed with water in a cardboard box with a blanket over them. And so the last time we had the sort of tacos in the park, he said, come dressed in tennis shoes and something to exercise in. And no one but he and I knew what was in store. But instead of actually doing exercise, everyone had to grab a super soaker, and we counted down from 10, and we had a squirt gun fight for 20 minutes until everyone ran out of water. So, lighthearted, but I think it really broke the ice, let's say. Not really broke the ice, but just we had a laugh. We had some time together. It's something you can do without putting anyone physically or sort of their health at risk. And I think that, again, just reinforced, God, this stuff is really important. And we just need to stay committed to finding ways to maintain or build on your culture, and certainly not let it erode in these really challenging times.
Hey, Dave, I was just going to answer.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, we have someone from the audience that said, hey, can you give me an example of, how we learned about each other during the Wednesday Hangouts? And honestly, we left it to the creativity of the team. So we've done some things like last week, I missed it, but they did a haiku, which I thought was really wonderful, about individuals. And the other that they did is we showed places of our environment that no one else has seen, because they would typically see me here in my office. And so we shared other parts of our home. Another example is we had a conversation around some of the things that we'd love to visit, where we'd love to travel. And so everybody had a place. Of course, we're on Zoom. And so they immediately show these beautiful places and talk about them and why they chose them. Another was our favorite foods. So again, it's really based on the individuals, but it really gets to know each other at a very personal level. And that's what we wanted to do, is we wanted to create that connection with the team. Great question.
I love that. I feel like Aurora and Robert, you're both hitting on something that I was thinking about, which is kind of letting different members of the team living into their strengths, right? So it made me think, we're a very small team, like 5 people with interns. And but we've had, and I don't know if anyone out there are Enneagram people, but one of our interns this summer is an Enneagram 7, which is just your life of the party person, right? And it had me thinking of, I've been so grateful. We were celebrating her last day on Friday, and I've been so grateful for her energy and just what she's the one who's on Slack cracking jokes all the time. And I think just recognizing the strengths, because I feel like in this season, if we hadn't had her as a part of the mix, it would have been overly serious. There wouldn't have been the Slack version of pulling out of the squirt guns. And so I think that's been a really neat thing that has come out of this, that I'm kind of hearing from you all and that we've experienced, is that different team members with different experience levels, and even like this girl on our team, we knew she would be a part of the team for a short period of time, but we needed her in this season, and that way that she naturally shows up was healthy for the whole. And so that's just, I think, nothing more than to kind of name that in gratitude. And I think that's given me as a leader more cognizance of that going forward, to kind of look for those things in hiring practices a little bit more, maybe like those just different personality types in a way that I might not have previously. And also just the space for people to show up in that way. And I love, Lana, you also named kind of out of necessity delegating and having other people carry those loads. I'm hearing you left the country on March 8th, and then we're in for a ride. I had a baby on March 9th. And so it's been a fascinating 6-7 months with a newborn to also be navigating, which on my end also led to the necessity for the team to carry things, and not, which I think was healthier for us as an organization. Amber, who has been on our team for several years, really took and run with the pivots that we needed to make immediately in those coming weeks, was able to live into that. And I feel a gratitude for that, because of just knowing that the team already held the culture, really having trust and confidence in the decisions that were being made in a climate that we couldn't have predicted. And then the only other thing I wanted to add to this question is to say, when I talk culture and community, we think about our staff, but also really just our whole organization. Like everyone who is a member really is a piece and a part of that. And so I think in that regard, and I'll brag on Amber again, is she very quickly led forward and conducted this series of empathy interviews, where literally intentionally created a list of all of our members, went through and called and just did these, how are you? What's going on? How can we support you? Which led to pivots that we're now making on an organizational front, things that we can monetize and that are moving the business forward. But that wasn't the goal of those. But the goal was just to really hear how people are and how they needed to be supported. But I think that's both important to the culture, but then it also is fascinating to me that those things almost always translate to good business as well, which feels really notable. But we've had to not just rely on the chance encounter of those things happening, but put a higher degree of intentionality behind them, I would say. And so really to kind of, which has been good as a team, it kind of has us naming and putting process around some things related to our values even more, whereas we used to just kind of take it as it comes on a daily basis. I feel like we have to build those into our weekly processes and our rhythms that much more, in a good way, I think.
Yeah. One thing, sort of in the same vein, sort of, is that, with everybody going remote and, there really has been sort of an epidemic of loneliness in the country. And with social justice, there is, between George Floyd and Jacob Blake and Breonna Taylor and the Black Lives Matter movement, there is, we're in a period of time of severe unrest that puts heavy weight on everybody. And I'm kind of curious how you folks have handled those stresses and challenges in working with your teams. Because I don't mind starting off with my answer to that, which is, my experience this summer and fall has been a little bit unusual in the sense that, Geekdom reopened for companies that have offices in May. And, my team wanted to come in to work so that we could work together, socially distanced, as part of the onboarding of the 2 interns and with the rest of the carryover staff. And so we would have been in person and have not lost those little individual collisions as much as a lot of other companies have. And I think to come back to the question about how have people handled the social unrest, I mean, what I've tried to do with them is just to be honest with them about it, to invite them to share their feelings, be open about sharing mine, recognizing that I am generationally different from all of them, and just making it feel like, to the extent they want to, they don't have to, but they have a place where they can talk about the stresses we're feeling, and they don't have to keep them bottled up while they're at work.
Dave, I'll pipe in here. One of the things that we did is we opened up the conversation. Again, going back to another crisis moment in our nation, it's important, especially with, I'm not saying Gen Xers or baby boomers are different, but there is such a heightened awareness of purpose and social justice in millennials, Gen Zs, and we allowed their voices to be heard. And we wanted to know what their thoughts were on how we as an organization would respond to these issues. And so they came up with these beautiful strategies and responses. And we ended up having a session where we brought in experts, diversity and inclusion experts, that would talk to our apprentices, that would talk to our team about how they're creating, very similar to what Sarah is doing in terms of, this mission city renewal. It all starts with the heart. It starts with the people. And so they talked a lot about diversity and inclusion. But in addition to that, the other hat that I wear is I volunteer for ICF San Antonio, which is a professional coaching association. And so what we did there is we moved quickly and brought a partnership together between Association of Change Management Professionals and professional coaches, because change management professionals, one of the areas that they have challenges with is people, the adoption of change through people. They're great at changing organizational processes, but it's the people that they have to really bring on board. And so they partnered with ICF Global, and particularly here in Texas, it's a partnership between ICF San Antonio, ICF Greater Austin, and ACMP Texas. And what we did is we brought these experts in to talk about not just diversity and inclusion, but get to the root. And the root is bias. So we began a speaker series on how to uncover the unconscious bias, because we, consciously we're very aware, but then we have a subconscious, and then we have totally, we're totally unconscious to our biases. And that has been phenomenal in terms of the coaching and the change management tools that they're discussing to really equip organizations and communities on how to address diversity, but at its core, bias. So those are some of the things that we did.
Interesting. Lana, how about you?
Yeah, so David, it kind of touches on your previous question. There's a little bit of an overlap.
Yeah.
With our experience. So, the last few months, a lot of my work has been less planning and more about putting out fires. And sometimes you forget kind of what's going on, because my interaction with the staff had been relative. I've been more of a supporting player in terms of the day-to-day operations, because the day-to-day operations had to be shouldered by my who coincidentally, again, one of the things that happened, one of the opportunities that happened, is that I realized that this person actually could step forward as a manager when we'd never had thought about that being something that could happen so quickly. But, the opportunity arose, it was shown that she could. I know I'm doing a little bit of a circle here, but again, a lot of my time was spent putting out fires, and the civil unrest that happened kind of was very obvious to me with friends of mine who were very hurt and were made to feel especially uncomfortable during those times. And these friends of mine were quite vocal. And then it's not until a conversation with some other friends are like, hey, Lana, did you check in with your staff to see if they're okay, if they need time? I was like, my goodness, it did not occur to me, because our interactions are quite, they're pretty regular. Things didn't seem to be taking on it just didn't occur to me, because I didn't get that feeling from them. Our interactions have been relatively normal. And then, so I made a point to bring it up with the staff individually. And the one thing that I came out from it is it's, at least in terms of our business, we're a small group of people. And at the end of the day, it comes down to the individual level. I mean, Aurora, you mentioned subconscious, there might be some biases there. How do you drill in to find out what you're missing. And unless, you ask the questions or you're interactive or you've got this exposure, you won't know what you're missing. And at least from my experience, you can't guess at what people are feeling. They may or may not tell you. And the best thing that I realized that I could do is just ask the questions and let people just open it up. Because really, depending on the individual, it may affect them, it may not. And another thing that I realized is sometimes, yes, on an ideological level, you make assumptions as to how this might affect a certain group, but it really depends on the individual. And unless you take it person by person, you cannot make any assumptions whatsoever. The best thing you can do is, as you mentioned, you just open it up, say that you're there, make no assumptions about who feels what, and take it. It has to be extremely personal. And so, I don't know if I'm answering your question, David, but yeah, I mean, for me, I just had to take it. I had to just be a lot more of a supporting. Much more of a supporter for my staff on all levels, whether it was work, whether it was, because it was a very stressful time. And my role very much shifted as a supporting actor in the business. I had to delegate and just take a step back and turned into admin supporter, shoulder to cry on, just so that we could all get through the day.
Right. So I'll just note for everybody in the audience, we have about 10 minutes left. And so this is, if people have questions that they would like to ask, this would be a good time to put them in the Q&A at the bottom, the Q&A bar at the bottom of the screen or in the chat. And I see that Aurora has posted a link to the series, which I'm sure is excellent, on uncovering the unconscious bias. Yeah, okay.
I was just going to mention something that Lana brought up on diversity and inclusion, because the reality is this topic is not going to go away. It is going to remain with us for the next generation. So, so the idea is that we all have to become aware first of our own biases and being able to feel safe about opening up the conversation with individuals. I had a conversation 2 weeks ago with a former boss of mine. This gentleman he's Black. He grew up in North Philly. He was brilliant. He went to Harvard on a scholarship. And he's a PhD now. And so we were chatting about diversity and inclusion. And he said, he asked me, he goes, how are you doing with all of this diversity and inclusion as a Latina woman? And I said, I don't know, because I have felt absolutely discrimination, bias for being in those classes. But honestly, I put them aside and I try to just get the job done. And he laughed and he said, I feel the same way. And he's on a major bank. He's a corporate director for one of the largest banks in the United States. And he said, I feel the same way. I never felt like I may have had bouts of discrimination, but I always felt like I just needed to roll up my sleeves, get in there, do my best, and get the job done. And I said, well, I'm glad to hear that you and I are the exceptions, but this is a real challenging conversation that we're all going to have to get through. And some of the strategies that we can do that is being aware of our own bias and talking about it openly.
The tiniest thing to build on that, sorry, David, is we happened to be leading a workshop. We were asked by a group connected with the city to lead a workshop on empathy and inclusion starting in July, with just total blessed side note, because what it did for us as an internal team is as we were building that workshop and presentation, we developed shared language of what we were going to be presenting to others, but it helped give us shared frameworks and shared language that now as things arise, which I think is exactly what you're describing, Aurora, in those biases, is like there's just now a way to come together to the same table and have some shared language and some shared mental frameworks to start having those conversations from, I think, which has been really healthy for us as a team. And then my other thing has just been knowing when to shut up and listen, kind of like for the people of color on our team have had amazing perspective to share that has broadened my own understanding as it relates to their experience, but also our programs and ways that we could be that much more aware and that much more inclusive in the things we're doing. And so I think the humility to listen to those voices as well is just worth naming.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so I know, Aurora, you have a hard stop at 1 o'clock. So hopefully we'll come back to you to get to say goodbye. But if you have to leave, we know you have to leave. So I'll ask one of the questions that's up in the chat bar, which is, what's the single most impactful thing each of you did to create an inclusive culture? And I know, Robert, you have a very diverse, wonderful team full of people who value both the company they work with and each other. So maybe we can start with you on that one.
Sure. Boy, single most important thing. That's tough.
I can answer it. I'll answer first if you want.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's for me, it's just approaching the process of hiring and recruiting with that as a single critical intentional point, making sure that when I'm reviewing resumes, that I'm looking for people that come from different educational backgrounds, different socioeconomical backgrounds, whose resumes, to the extent they do indicate it, will tell me something that their presence in the interview process is going to make them somebody who represents something that I don't have. And I know that when I've hired people in the past, I've been 40% of the women, 40% of the women I've hired have been minorities. 40% of the women I've hired have been LGBTQ. Almost all the people I've hired have been women. And, and I think it's just it's just making it a point to do that, and I know that with some of obviously I'm hiring for talent, and, you have to be able to do the job, but I think it's just a matter of just, it's just sort of emblazoned in the thought process.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I to be fair, to be honest with the panelists and to anyone listening, I don't want to stand up here and say that we have a published policy and framework that we've been executing against. As it so happens, we have a diverse team, men and women and people of color. I don't want to sit here and try to look at anyone in the eye and say that was deliberate. It just happens to have worked out in our short team of 9 people. We've got some good representation, Asian, Latino, African-American, male, female, et cetera. But I can't say that that was just super deliberate. I think that Jason and I try to say we hire, look, the first 4 people on our team, half of the team in the solar space are known quantities, right? So part of it was like, oh, so-and-so is looking for a job. Well, she's awesome. We already know she's awesome because one of us has worked with her somewhere before. So that's kind of a no-brainer. So to be fair, as a small business, half of our hiring has been not word of mouth, but in our sphere of influence, happens to have advanced some diversity, but really it was like, she's available? Oh my gosh, let's dream up a job for her because I can't believe she's looking for work and we need that kind of talent. And so I can't say that there was this sort of ordained thing that we sat down and planned on. I do think it does permeate how we. Let me also say, back to the episodes of the summer and Black Lives Matter, et cetera, that has caused us to actually have deliberate conversations about how do we do hiring? How is unconscious bias creeping into our organization? What is our plan moving forward as we scale? And actually, how do we have some uncomfortable conversations amongst our team and stop and listen, to Sarah's point? So I don't want to roll it back to the topic from before, but I think that has been an extremely helpful thing for our team, because we've slowed down and we put the topic out on the table, and it's messy and it's ugly and it's unpleasant. And, but we sort of just tried to wade into it with honesty and with, I don't know, just sort of candor. So I think that has helped our organization. I'd like to think it has helped us be better moving forward. So I don't know if that's a wishy-washy answer, but I don't want to stand up here and represent that we've got some sort of, perfect execution plan and pat myself on the back. I think we got work to do as a company, as we have work to do as Americans. And we're finally having those conversations, which is really important.
Yeah.
I'd like to say that, sorry, David, I just wanted to say that our journey very much mirrored Robert's journey. It wasn't intentional, but our staff just happened to be of my minority makeup. But the opportunity here with what happened over the summer, what's continued to happening, is to say, we've got a chance now to help just a little bit in making things more right. And we're in a position to now change the purpose of what we do moving forward in terms of making things a little better. So maybe not necessarily for us, not necessarily in the hiring, because that happens anyway, but in the career advancement and development and focus there.
Yeah, Roy, I know you've got to run soon.
I was just gonna, I'm gonna add something here else, a link in the chat. But for us, it is absolutely listening to the people first, because they're the ones that are on mission to help us deliver an exceptional experiential learning experience for the apprentices. So we take care of our people and ensure that they have what they need. And it's not just the resources, but it is the engagement of what Robert alluded to before, and that's care. It really is caring by listening, by having the conversation. I don't think any of us have it down perfectly, but what does matter is that we as leaders, our empathy, our care, our listening really does create that psychological safety in an organization where people can really be who they are called to be, and tap their potential during such an epidemic, or just during such a pandemic. Because people want to feel safe and they want to feel like they're adding value. And of course, the way we do that is through conversation, through relationship, and understanding where they are and where they want to go in their work as we're serving our mission to serve apprentices. So that's what I would add. And thank you all for having me here today.
Yeah. Bye, Aurora. Yeah, one thing I'll mention on this topic was that over the summer, I set up for my two interns, Zari and Montana, who are two fabulous young women, opportunities to interview with different people. And one of the interviews that they had a chance to, one of the people they had a chance to talk with was an actress and an activist in Los Angeles, whose name is Raquel Wallace. And she talked about, she's out in the streets protesting every day. This was sort of at the height of the George Floyd protests. And one of the questions she was asked was, what do you say to white people who feel guilty about the fact that they had not done more to advance causes of racial justice or equality up until now. And her answer was just fantastic. I thought it was very memorable to me. She just said, it doesn't matter how late you are to the party as long as you bring a gift. And it was doing what you can to play to your own strengths, to lean into things that you care about as a way of just opening your eyes and listening and educating yourself about, the concerns of other people. Sarah, do you have any additional thoughts?
Sure. I just threw in the chat a link. Honestly, just a process that names kind of what Aurora was describing that quite a few people might be familiar with. But I came from design agency world, and we would talk a lot about human-centered design. And it's just the process for what Aurora was describing of putting the end user as a seat at the table, as the creator of whatever it is, and letting the solutions bubble up from that collective wisdom and collective experience so that you don't design something that wouldn't resonate. And I think it applies to all of this conversation. And we have a book in our library that's a literal toolkit that has different workshops you can pull from in that regard, and the way to create those kinds of spaces. And so I just threw the link to that in the chat.
Cool. Well, I think we're running towards the end of our time. Is there anything else you want from your end?
I mean, I just wanted to say thank you again for you all for sharing your expertise and your honesty and transparency. At least for me, that's been a big pillar, I guess, for 80/20 is transparency, and just as me and how I feel valued as an employee. So I appreciate all of your insights again, and your time as well, because I know that that's limited. So with that, yeah, I think that's it. Thank you guys. And I will post this recording on our YouTube channel. That will be linked back on the schedule later. So yeah, thank you. Have a great afternoon, and keep the conversation going.
Yeah. So Sarah, Lana, Robert, thanks so much.
Thank you,
thank
guys.
you, David.
Thanks for creating the conversation.
Right. We'll talk to everybody later.
All right.
Bye.
Peace.
Bye.